I married a millionaire. On our wedding day, he told me, "My children think you're a gold digger. Prove them wrong." The test was absurd. He gave me a credit card with no limit and told me not to spend a single cent. Little did he know, I was already rich, just not in the way he expected. I married Laurent Devereaux on a rainy afternoon in Paris, inside a glass chapel overlooking the Seine. Everything was immaculate. The guests, the flowers, the silence that lingered between us like fog. He was 20 years older than me, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, his salt and pepper hair combed back like a man who had never known disorder. I was in a dress that cost more than my father's house, wearing a ring that could pay off every loan my family ever owed. Laurent was a millionaire. Technically, a multimillionaire. Owner of a portfolio of luxury hotels spread across Europe. His name opened doors I didn't even know existed. We barely kissed at the altar. It wasn't love. At least not the kind people write songs about. It was a transaction sealed with diamond rings and champagne smiles. I was 28. He was 48. He'd been married twice before with 3 adult children who refused to even attend the ceremony. After the guests were gone and the violinist had packed up, Laurent pulled me aside in the empty hall. He didn't touch me. He didn't smile. He simply said, "My children think you're a gold digger. Prove them wrong." Then he handed me a platinum credit card. "No limit," he added, "but don't spend a single cent." I blinked. Thought it was a joke. He wasn't joking. "That's your test. Fail it, and you'll never be part of this family." I stared at the card in my palm, cold and shining like a weapon. I wanted to laugh, because the irony was almost too much to bear. Laurent had no idea who I was. He knew my name, of course, my background, my modest career as an antique appraiser. But he had no idea what I carried under my skin, what kind of wealth ran through my veins. Not in cash, but in something much rarer. Legacy. I wasn't poor, far from it. I just never needed to flaunt it. My great-grandmother, Isabella van der Meer, was one of the most discreet art collectors in Western Europe. After the war, she rebuilt entire galleries under a false name to protect her collection. That legacy passed to my mother. Then to me. Not in bank accounts or private jets, but in things no one could trace. Silent masterpieces, hidden in places no one looked. While Laurent's children worried I'd drain his accounts, I owned a painting they once begged their father to buy at auction, and I never even hung it. But I said nothing. I slipped the card into my purse and smiled. "All right," I said softly. "I accept." We flew to Monaco that evening. It wasn't a honeymoon. It was exile. Laurent worked all day from the penthouse of the Hôtel des Lumières, a place he partially owned. I spent hours on the balcony, watching the coastline and sipping tea I brought from home. I didn't order room service. I didn't visit the hotel spa. I wore the same 3 dresses on rotation. I passed every temptation like a saint in silk heels. But it wasn't about the money, it was about the control. Laurent didn't want a wife. He wanted a symbol. A woman who could sit beside him at charity galas without embarrassing him. Someone elegant, obedient, but above all, empty. I played the part so well, it scared me. 10 days passed. Then one night, around midnight, I came back from a walk along the pier to find one of his daughters in the living room. Tall, blonde, dressed in designer from head to toe. "Clara," she said, without offering a hand. "Laurent's daughter. I'm sure you've heard horrible things about me." I nodded. "Likewise." She gave me a tight smile. "Let's skip the civility. I just want to know one thing. Why are you really here?" I met her eyes, and I said the first true thing I'd said since the wedding, because I don't like being underestimated. Her eyes narrowed. Then she tossed something on the table, a folded document. "Prenup," she said. "Read it carefully. You'll get nothing if he divorces you." I didn't even glance at it. I knew exactly what I'd signed, but Clara had no idea what I was capable of, and neither did Laurent. The day after Clara's visit, Laurent flew to Zurich without telling me. No note, no goodbye, just a quiet disappearance, leaving his tailored suits hanging like ghosts in the closet. I wasn't surprised. He'd never promised me affection, only a stage to perform on. But what he didn't realize was that I had already begun setting the pieces of my own game. The moment he left, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Isabel," I said when she answered. "I need access to the Geneva vault." She hesitated only a second. "The paintings?" "No," I replied. "The letters." I wasn't ready to use the collection yet. That would come later. But the letters, they were my proof. Written by my great-grandmother and stored in a temperature-controlled archive beneath the Swiss mountains. They held secrets about families that now ruled Europe's cultural scene. Hidden trades, illegal acquisitions, names that would crumble empires if ever spoken aloud. I'd kept them untouched for years, as a kind of moral insurance. Now they were leverage. Isabel, the family's private archivist, arranged everything. She never asked why. I traveled to Geneva alone, carrying nothing but a scarf and a locked briefcase. When I returned to Monaco, Laurent was waiting for me. He stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, cooking pasta like we were a normal couple. "Did you enjoy your little getaway?" he asked without looking at me. I placed my briefcase gently on the marble counter. "Yes," I said. "I saw some old friends." He smirked. "Friends who like to keep secrets in Swiss vaults?" He had someone watching me. Of course he did, but he had no idea what those secrets were, and I intended to keep it that way. We ate in silence. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you regret marrying me?" I didn't answer. Instead, I poured us both a glass of wine, the kind he liked. French, obscure, something from his father's private cellar. He sipped it cautiously, as if waiting for poison. Then he said it again, more quietly. "Do you regret it?" I looked at him for a long time, at the lines around his eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly as he held the glass, and I said, "No, I regret trusting you." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. He stood, walked to the living room, and opened a drawer I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a black envelope. He handed it to me. "This is from Clara." I opened it. Inside was a stack of photographs. Me, walking out of a gallery in Vienna 6 months before the wedding, laughing with a man in a dark suit. The kind of photos that could be twisted into any story. "She hired someone to follow you," Laurent said. "She was trying to find proof you were lying." I kept my face still. The man in the photos was my cousin, but no one needed to know that. "What did she find?" I asked calmly. He studied me. "Nothing, but it doesn't matter. In this family, the truth is never enough." I closed the envelope, slid it back toward him. "You married me to prove something to them," I said, "but now you're realizing I don't play by your rules." He didn't deny it. Instead, he said something that made my blood go cold. "You have 3 months." I frowned. 3 months for what? "To prove you belong here. And if I don't?" He leaned in. "Then I'll make sure you leave with less than you came with." He thought I had nothing. He thought he was the powerful one, but the game had just begun, and he didn't know I'd already played it before. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone wiped clean. No contacts, no messages, no photos, everything gone. Laurent hadn't even tried to hide it. He stood by the window, sipping his espresso like a man reading the morning news. "You'll thank me later," he said. "Digital clutter is toxic." I didn't respond. I simply walked to the safe hidden behind a false panel in my closet. The briefcase was still there, untouched. I opened it just enough to make sure the letters were in place, then locked it again. Laurent could erase my phone. He could manipulate the people around me, but he couldn't touch the truth I held. That night, I took a cab to Nice without telling him. I visited a private banker named Victor Malinov, a man my family had used for over 20 years. He was discreet, cold, and meticulous. Exactly what I needed. "I want to activate the silent account," I told him. Victor didn't blink. "May I ask why now?" "Because my husband thinks I'm poor." He nodded once and passed me a single piece of paper. "Sign here." With one signature, I reactivated an account containing more wealth than Laurent had in all his visible assets combined. The balance wouldn't show up in public records. It was protected by art, bonds, and a portion of a northern Italian vineyard that supplied wine to 3 royal families. Before I left, Victor handed me a small red notebook. "What's this?" I asked. "Your great-grandmother's original inventory." She left notes. I opened it briefly. My heart stopped on page 6. "Never trust a man who gives you silence and rules in the same breath." Isabella had been through this before. I took the notebook and returned to Monaco just before midnight. Laurent was awake, sitting in the dark, a glass of scotch in hand. "You're making this difficult," he said without turning on the light. I set the notebook down on the table between us. "No," I replied. "You're mistaking silence for surrender." He stared at the notebook, then back at me. "What is that?" "Insurance." He laughed bitterly. "You think you can threaten me?" I leaned closer. "I think you underestimate how many people would burn if I opened those vaults." For the first time, his confidence cracked. It was subtle. A tightening of the jaw, a flicker in the eyes. I'd touched a nerve. The next day, his son arrived, Adrien, the golden boy. He looked like a version of Laurent that hadn't rotted from the inside yet. Charming, polite, disarmingly intelligent. He greeted me with a kiss on each cheek and a bouquet of flowers. For the beautiful mystery who stole my father's peace, he joked. I forced a smile. Adrian was dangerous in a different way, not because he hated me, but because he didn't. He saw me as a puzzle. Something to be solved, then quietly removed. At dinner, he asked too many questions. How did you and my father meet? What's your opinion on inheritance? Do you believe in prenups? Laurent said nothing. He just watched. After dessert, Adrian walked me to the balcony. The wind was cold. He leaned in close and whispered, "If you leave now, I can guarantee you safety. Wait too long, and someone else might decide your silence isn't worth the risk." I turned to face him. "You think I'm here to take your father's money?" He smiled. "No, I think you're here to remind us that we've never really had power, only the illusion of it." Then he left me alone, but I wasn't scared. Because Adrian had just confirmed something I suspected from the beginning. This family wasn't trying to protect their fortune. They were trying to hide where it really came from, and I was getting closer to the truth than any of them could afford. 2 weeks passed. No more warnings, no more surveillance, at least not the kind I could see. The Devros had gone quiet, which meant only one thing. They were planning something. Laurent traveled constantly. Zurich, Milan, then a quick stop in London for business. Though I noticed his phone buzzing with the same unknown number each night at 2 a.m., he never answered in front of me. Adrian disappeared too. And Clara? She was circling. She showed up at my door one afternoon, wearing a white coat and holding a single pastry box. "I brought cannelés," she said too sweetly. "Dad said you liked them." I didn't move. She tilted her head. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" I stepped aside, mostly out of curiosity. Clara walked in like she owned the place. She didn't look around. She didn't need to. She already knew every corner. Probably had photos, floor plans, security layouts. We sat across from each other, like enemies pretending to play tea party. She opened the box. "Do you know why Dad really married you?" she asked casually, slicing the pastry in half. "It wasn't love, obviously, and it wasn't just about appearances." I said nothing. She continued, "He was trying to protect something. Something that got too close to exposure last year. I thought maybe you were just a distraction. A shield. But now..." She leaned forward. "I think you're the threat." I met her gaze. "That's your mistake, thinking I came here to fight." Her eyes narrowed. "Didn't you?" I leaned back. "No, I came here to bury someone." She froze. For the first time, Clara looked unsure, not afraid, just unprepared. And that was enough. She stood up slowly. "You think this is a game?" she said coldly. "But this family isn't built on rules. It's built on secrets, and you've barely scratched the surface." I followed her to the door. Before she left, I said one last thing. "Tell Adrian I liked his threat, but next time he should send someone less charming." She didn't turn around. She just walked away. That night, I opened the notebook again. Page 12, a list of names. Some circled, some crossed out. One name stood out. Julien Marceau. My blood ran cold. Julien was an art dealer, a famous one. Sleek, powerful, untouchable. But 30 years ago, he'd been accused of laundering stolen wartime art through fake auctions in Milan. The charges vanished. The witnesses disappeared. And now? Julien Marceau was the godfather of Laurent's oldest son. It was all connected. Laurent's fortune didn't just come from hotels and clean investments. It came from art theft, from laundering, from decades of silencing anyone who got too close. And I had proof of it all. In letters, ledgers, hidden inventories. But if I released it now, I'd go down with them. I needed one final piece. A name, a document, a confession. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:47 a.m., my phone, the new one, not even connected to Laurent's network, buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words, "Meet me," and an address in Lyon. No name, no explanation, but something in my gut told me, whoever sent that message knew everything. I arrived in Lyon under a different name, hair pulled back, no jewelry, a coat one size too big, borrowed from a maid who didn't ask questions. I knew I was being followed, so I took 3 different trains, crossed a bridge on foot, then doubled back through an alley before finally stepping into the small cafe at the edge of Rue Saint-Paul. It was almost empty. Except for one man. He sat in the back near the window with a thick folder on the table and a coffee he hadn't touched. He didn't stand when I approached. "You came," he said simply. His face was older than I remembered, but unmistakable. Etienne Marchand, Former legal advisor to the Devereaux family, fired abruptly 5 years ago. No one ever said why. I didn't think you'd be the one to message me, I said as I sat. I wasn't, he replied. But when I found out who you really were, I figured you'd understand what's at stake. He pushed the folder toward me. Inside were photocopies, black and white, poorly scanned but damning, bank transfers, silent donations, private shipping manifests. At least 3 pieces of art smuggled out of Eastern Europe in the early 1990s, donated to museums under false names, all tied to shell companies owned by Laurent Devereaux. My breath caught in my throat. You tried to stop this, I said. Etienne nodded. I told him to walk away. He didn't. And when I threatened to go public, someone burned down my country house with all my records inside. I stared at him. Why now? He hesitated. Because you scare him. And if he's scared, that means you have power. I closed the folder and slid it into my bag. This is enough to ruin him. Etienne shook his head. No, this is enough to make him desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. He stood, placed a hand on my shoulder for just a second. If you're going to bring down Laurent Devereaux, he said quietly, make sure you don't miss. I left Lyon the same night. Back in Monaco, Laurent was waiting in the lobby. He looked tired, worn down in a way I hadn't seen before, as if the weight of 1,000 invisible crimes had finally started to drag him under. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just walked beside me in silence, up to the penthouse. When we stepped inside, I found the briefcase open on the coffee table. The letters, the notebook, everything, laid out like evidence. I froze. He sat down across from it. I wanted to believe you were harmless, he said. I wanted to think this was just another mistake I'd eventually buy my way out of. His voice was calm, dead calm. But you're not a mistake. You're a threat. I didn't deny it. He picked up one letter, the one implicating Julien Marceau by name. Then he asked, almost sadly, how much do you want to disappear? I walked to the table, took the letter from his hands, and tore it in half. You still think this is about money? He looked up at me, and I smiled. It's never been about money, Laurent. It's about legacy, and yours is about to be rewritten. That night, I booked a press meeting. Anonymous. Off-record, safe, and for the first time, I was ready to tell the truth, not just about Laurent, but about the entire Devereaux dynasty. The morning of the interview, I received a package with no sender. It was wrapped in brown paper, sealed with red wax, the kind used in private family estates. Old money, old rules. Inside, there was only one thing, a photograph. It showed a young girl, hair in braids, dirty shoes, standing in front of a boarded-up gallery in Prague. The back of the photo had one handwritten sentence. You think your family is clean? My hands trembled. I hadn't seen that photo in over 20 years. It was me, at 8 years old. The day my mother took me to see the ruins of the Vandermeer estate, the one destroyed during the war, supposedly for its political neutrality. Only 5 people had copies of that photograph. And now, someone wanted me to know they'd been watching me long before I ever met Laurent. I canceled the press meeting. Not out of fear, but because something was wrong. The game had changed. This wasn't about silencing me. It was about exposing me, too. And whoever sent that photo knew exactly where to strike. I returned to the penthouse and found Adrien waiting in the living room. He didn't bother pretending this time. I told them you wouldn't stop, he said. He poured himself a drink and offered me one. I declined. He sipped, eyes never leaving mine. You think you're the only one with secrets, Clara? You think your precious family didn't make deals to survive the war? My grandfather bought your grandmother's silence, and your mother kept that silence by selling pieces of your legacy to the same men you're trying to destroy. I stared at him, my pulse thudding. You're lying. He smiled calmly. We found the missing pages from the notebook, the ones you never saw. Your family wasn't just hiding stolen art. They were part of the network that moved it, protected it, traded it. He took something from his coat pocket, a ring. Gold, with the Vandermeer crest engraved, my mother's. I believe this belongs to you. He set it down gently on the table. I'm not here to threaten you, Clara, he said quietly. I'm here to warn you. If you go through with this, we both burn. I picked up the ring, held it in my palm. It was heavy. Not just physically, but with everything it implied. My mother had never spoken of the war, of the deals, of the losses. Now I understood why. She'd protected the truth, not for power, but for shame, for legacy, for me. Adrien stood, buttoned his coat. You still have a choice, he said at the door. You can leave all this behind, Let Laurent fade into irrelevance. Or you can expose him and let the world uncover everything you've been hiding too. I didn't answer, because I knew there was no right choice anymore, only consequences. That night, I returned to the Geneva vault. I retrieved the full ledger, not just the letters, the names, the trades, the signatures, the family trees, and I found what I feared most: my mother's name, her handwriting, her signature on a shipment dated 1987, addressed to a shell company owned by Julien Marceau. She wasn't innocent. None of us were. But it didn't change what Laurent had done. It didn't erase the threats, the manipulation, the fear. So I made my decision. If we were all going to drown, I'd make sure I was the one to open the floodgates. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of the penthouse library, surrounded by old documents and shattered illusions. Pages that once meant safety now looked like confessions. Everything my family had preserved, the silence, the elegance, the so-called legacy, was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie, just like the Devereaux name. I stared at the ring in my palm, my mother's ring, the same one she wore in every photo. I'd never taken it off since Adrienne returned it, not because I forgave her, but because I needed the reminder. This war wasn't just theirs anymore. It was ours, mine. At 6 a.m., I called a journalist, not one of the ones Laurent could buy. This one worked for L'Éclat, an independent investigative outlet with no allegiance to any family, no matter how old their money was. Her name was Camille Vaillant. I didn't give her details, just a meeting place, a time, and a warning: bring protection. By noon, we were seated across from each other in a quiet art restoration studio in Marseille, surrounded by canvases in various stages of repair. Camille was sharp. No pleasantries, no small talk. You said you have information on the Devereaux art laundering network. I nodded. I have names, dates, transactions. But this isn't just about them. It's bigger. It goes back decades. My family was involved too. Her pen didn't stop moving. You're willing to go on record? I hesitated for half a second. Then I said, yes. Because even if it meant destroying the Vandermeer name, I'd rather light the fire than die choking on secrets. I gave Camille copies. Not everything, but enough to start. Enough to shake the foundation of the Devereaux empire. She promised to verify everything before going public. I gave her 3 names to double-check first: Julien Marceau, Etienne Marchand, and a hidden holding company under the name Signe Noir Holdings. She raised an eyebrow at that last one. Signe Noir? She asked. That company owns property in 7 countries, including 3 museums. I nodded. It also funded the original Devereaux Trust. Camille looked at me like she finally understood the scale. This story could ruin people. That's the point. We shook hands. By the time I returned to Monaco, it had already begun. I stepped into the penthouse and found Laurent staring at the television, his face pale, a glass of water trembling in his hand. Camille hadn't published the full article yet, but the teaser was out. Just one sentence, displayed in bold across every screen in the city. The Devereaux fortune was built on stolen art, and one woman is ready to prove it. He turned to me, slow and cold. What have you done? I didn't flinch. I did what you never could. He stood, eyes full of something I couldn't place. Wasn't quite rage, wasn't quite fear. You don't understand the reach of this family. You think you've won something, Clara? You've just opened a door that will never close. I walked past him, opened the briefcase, and removed the last sealed envelope I'd kept hidden even from myself. I know, I said. That's why I'm not closing it. He watched as I dropped the envelope onto the floor between us. His name on the front, not Laurent Devereaux, but the one he thought everyone had forgotten, his real name. The one tied to the original Marceau transactions. His face turned to stone. You've been digging in places that were buried for a reason, and now, I whispered, they'll finally see the light. Because sometimes, the only way to escape a legacy is to destroy it completely. The article went live at 8 a.m., not in whispers, not behind paywalls, but on the front page of L'Éclat, with high-resolution scans, full names, and a headline that sliced like a blade: Europe's hidden art empire, how the Devereaux legacy was built on war, lies, and stolen masterpieces. Within hours, everything shifted. Bank accounts were frozen. Museum boards began emergency meetings. Julien Marceau's name trended across every European media outlet, his connection to half a dozen private galleries now under public scrutiny. But it was Laurent's face, pale, hollow, exhausted. That made the evening news. He didn't speak, didn't issue a statement, didn't deny a single thing, because he knew there was no defense left. By midday, the gates of the Devereux estate in Bordeaux were locked. Lawyers scrambled. Properties were under review, and Clara Devereux, the outsider, the gold digger, the test subject, had become the catalyst of a cultural reckoning, but it came with a cost. That afternoon, Adrian appeared at my door again. No smile this time, no charm, just a letter. He handed it to me, eyes darker than I'd ever seen. "It's from Clara," he said. I frowned. "But you're Clara." He didn't laugh. "Not that Clara." Our grandmother. My chest tightened. She'd died years ago, quietly, surrounded by art and silence. But apparently, she hadn't left without speaking. I opened the letter with trembling hands. It was short, brutal. "If you're reading this, it means the truth has finally escaped its frame. I always knew it would. We didn't build a legacy. We buried one. Don't waste time defending us. Let it fall. Let them remember us as we were. Terrified, greedy, and fragile. No signature. Just the letter. And a single pressed flower at the bottom, dry, brittle, nearly turned to dust." Adrian watched me read it. His jaw clenched. "She knew," he whispered. "All along." I nodded. She wasn't the only one. He didn't stay long. Didn't threaten me this time. Didn't beg. Just said, "Be careful. They're not done yet." I didn't ask who they were. I already knew. By evening, I received a message from Camille. Short. Direct. "Interpol contacted me. They want to speak to you. And they want the originals." This was it. No more hidden vaults. No more safe houses. I took the briefcase. The real one. With everything. The ledgers, the photographs, the lists that crossed generations, and made my way to Geneva. Not in disguise this time. Not afraid. But as I walked through the airport, something felt off. People looked at me too long. Security seemed tighter, and as I approached the gate, a man stepped in front of me. Black coat, earpiece. No smile. "Clara Vandermeer?" I froze. "Yes?" "You need to come with us." He didn't show me a badge. Didn't say who he worked for. Just reached for my arm. But before he could touch me, someone else appeared. A woman. Blonde, mid-40s, calm, sharp eyes. "Step away from her," she said to the man. "Now." He hesitated, then disappeared into the crowd. I turned to her, shaken. She showed me a card, real this time. Interpol. Division of Cultural Crimes. "My name is Eliska Novak," she said. "You're not safe, but if you want to finish what you started, come with me." I didn't have to think. I followed her. Because whatever came next, I had already made peace with one truth. Legacies don't end in silence. They end in fire. They took me to a safe house outside Geneva, cold, windowless, buried beneath a government facility no one talks about. Eliska Novak was calm, methodical. She didn't treat me like a witness. She treated me like a time bomb. "We've been trying to bring down the Devereux-Marceau network for over 12 years, she said, placing a thick file in front of me. "You're the first person to come forward with documents that tie all branches together, financial, historical, and personal." I opened the file. Inside were photos of people I knew, smiling at weddings, toasting at charity balls. The same people now under investigation for cultural theft on a scale that spanned generations. Eliska pointed to one face in particular. "This is Franz Eidelmann, former gallery director in Munich. He's been missing since last week." I blinked. "I met him at an exhibit in Vienna. He gave me champagne and warned me not to marry Laurent." She nodded slowly. "He was part of the inner circle. He tried to leave. We think someone made sure he didn't." The message was clear. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival. And now, I was too deep to walk away. Over the next 48 hours, I handed over everything. Originals, copies, vault access, passwords. I answered every question. I signed every statement. And then Eliska asked the one question I hadn't prepared for. "Why did you really marry Laurent Devereux?" I hesitated. It wasn't for money. It wasn't even for revenge. So I told her the truth. Because I wanted to see if someone like me could change the ending of a story that's always been written by men who never paid for anything. She didn't react, just nodded and left the room. That night I received a call. It was untraceable, but I knew the voice. Laurent, calm, low, dangerous. "You've burned everything, Clara," he said. "You think they'll protect you? You think Interpol cares about your grandmother's letters? I said nothing. Then he whispered, "You never understood what this family really protects. It's not art. It's power," I replied, quiet and slow. "Then maybe it's time someone took it away." There was a pause, then a final warning. "You won't walk away from this." "None of us do." The line went dead. I stared at the screen. I didn't cry. I didn't shake, because deep down I knew he was right. There's a cost to truth. And mine was coming. The next morning, Camille published part 2 of the investigation. It included my full name, my connection to the Vandermeer archive, and a single quote from me: "I'd rather destroy everything they built than live another day under it." It went viral in under an hour. People called me brave. Others called me a traitor. But the only message that mattered came in an envelope, hand-delivered by Aliska, a court summons, not as a witness, as a defendant. The Devereaux legal team had officially declared war, accusing me of theft, fraud, and defamation. And just like that, the story shifted. Now I was the one on trial. The summons arrived in a black envelope. Not white, not official, black. As if even the paper had already decided I was guilty. I was being sued in the Court of Justice of the European Union. Not a local court, not a civil suit. International defamation, intellectual theft, and reputational sabotage. The charges were absurd, artificial, built on lies crafted by men in tailored suits who'd spent decades rewriting history with money and silence. But the impact was real. Camille called me first. Her voice was shaking. "They're turning the narrative," she said. "Suddenly you're not a whistleblower. You're the girl who used forged letters to destroy a noble family. They're calling you a professional manipulator, a pathological liar. They're saying you married into the Devereaux name just to gain access." I almost laughed. That part, at least, wasn't entirely wrong. But what they didn't know, what no one outside Interpol and my bloodline understood, was that I hadn't forged a single document. And I had one last piece of evidence no one had seen yet. I didn't tell Camille. I didn't even tell Aliska. Because if I did, that piece might disappear just like Franz Eidelman had. Instead, I booked a private meeting with the magistrate handling the early proceedings. It was held in a nondescript office in Luxembourg, far from the cameras, far from the screams of public opinion. The magistrate was a man named Victor Schilling, gray eyes, older than he looked, not easily impressed. He read through my submitted documentation in silence for 20 minutes before finally asking, "Do you have anything else? Something not already in the hands of the press or the agency?" I slid a key across the table. "Steel, plain, worn." "To a box in Rotterdam," I said, "owned by the Vandermeer estate since 1952. Never opened, never listed. My mother told me it was empty." He frowned. "Is it?" I met his eyes. "No, it contains a painting. The Morning Child by Peter van Heemskerk, stolen by Nazi officers in 1944, believed lost. My great-grandmother hid it, along with a written statement, dated and notarized, naming the men she traded with to keep it safe, including a man named Henri Devereaux, Laurent's grandfather. That was the last domino. Victor didn't react. Not visibly, but I saw something shift behind his eyes. A verdict forming. He didn't promise anything. No justice. No absolution. He simply nodded and said, "We'll retrieve the box." Back in the safe house, Aliska was waiting. "You gave them the key," she said. Not a question. I nodded. They needed to see that this wasn't about revenge. It's about proof. She looked at me for a long time, then handed me a folder. Inside was an itinerary. Flights, hotels, lawyers, protection. Because the next part wasn't legal. It was survival. "The moment that painting is confirmed," she said, "you won't be safe anymore. They won't just sue. They'll bury you, discredit you, or worse." I folded the folder shut. I know. And still, I wasn't afraid. Because I wasn't just exposing a family anymore. I was ending an era. One ruled by forged beauty, whispered threats, and blood-soaked silence. And I was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant losing everything. News of the painting broke 3 days later, not through the press. Through an internal leak at the European Art Crimes database. Someone, likely Interpol, had confirmed the authenticity of The Morning Child, hidden for 81 years. The last known masterpiece by Peter van Heemskerk. And the worst part? The notarized statement from my great-grandmother had been intact, preserved in the box. Henri Devereaux's name was right there, in ink, tied directly to the illegal art trade of the 1940s. Laurent's family hadn't just benefited from art laundering, they had orchestrated part of it. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Journalists started to ask different questions. Was Clara Vandermeer really a gold digger? Or was she the heir to the truth? Public opinion began to fracture. Protesters appeared outside Devereux hotels across Europe. 2 museums announced they were suspending their partnerships with the family. A Swiss gallery removed Laurent's name from its donor's wall. But the silence from the Devereux estate was thunderous. No statements, no denials, no press conferences. They were cornered. And that made them dangerous. That night, I found my hotel room door broken. Not forced, picked, subtle, professional. Nothing had been stolen, but someone had gone through my things. I called Eliska. She arrived within an hour, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers. They swept the room, checked for listening devices, and then told me quietly, "You need to leave. Now." We moved me to a secure residence in Brussels, but the fear followed me like a shadow. At 2 a.m., I received a message on an encrypted app only Interpol had access to. "He won't let you speak in court." No name, no sender, just that. I didn't sleep after that, because I knew exactly who he was. Laurent Devereux had stopped trying to win in the public eye. Now he was planning something else, something final, and I only had one move left before the trial began. I contacted Camille. "I want to record a testimony," I told her, privately, with everything, every name, every lie, every piece of it. She agreed instantly. We met the next morning in a church basement in Ghent, the only place I felt even slightly safe. She set up 2 cameras, 1 backup microphone, and nodded. "Ready?" I took a deep breath, and then I began. For 2 hours, I spoke without stopping. I told the story the courts wouldn't hear in time, the story the Devereux would try to erase if I disappeared, the legacy they'd hidden beneath decades of polished wealth and silent corruption. I ended the video with 1 sentence. "If this is the last thing I ever say, let the world know. Silence was never consent." Camille promised to release it if anything happened to me. Then she left with the footage. And I returned to Brussels with one thought echoing in my head. If Laurent couldn't destroy the truth, he would try to destroy me. The night before the pre-trial hearing, I received an envelope under my door. No name, no handwriting, just my room number scribbled in rushed ink. Inside was a single page, a copy of my mother's death certificate, and a photo I had never seen. It showed her sitting at a long table with Henri Devereux, laughing, drinking, signing something. The timestamp said 1993. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because it confirmed the one thing I hadn't said out loud yet. My mother hadn't just inherited the silence. She had preserved it, protected it, perhaps even profited from it. And I had broken the pact. It wasn't just the Devereux family I'd betrayed, it was my own. That was the final play. They wanted to disarm me emotionally, plant the seed of guilt, make me hesitate right before the world was about to hear my truth. But I was beyond guilt now, beyond fear. I walked into the courtroom in Luxembourg the next morning wearing a dark suit, no jewelry, and my mother's ring on a chain around my neck, not as a tribute, but as a reminder of everything I had chosen to unbury. Laurent was already seated. He looked older, thinner, as if the past had finally caught up with him. His lawyers flanked him like a wall, 4 of them, all well-fed and soulless. Adrian wasn't there. Neither was Clara. They had disappeared from the public eye weeks ago. No statements, no interviews, just absence. But I knew they were watching. The room was filled with journalists, legal officials, and art historians who had once praised the Devereux donations. Now, they whispered behind hands and typed notes into glowing screens. The magistrate called my name. I stood, steady, silent. Then he spoke the words that shifted everything. Due to the discovery of the Rotterdam vault and the authentication of the lost Van Heemskerk painting, this court has ruled that the claims of the plaintiff, Laurent Devereux, are to be temporarily suspended pending full criminal investigation by international authorities. Gasps. Silence. And then, chaos. Laurent stood abruptly. His lawyers rushed to him, whispering, guiding him back down. I didn't move. I didn't smile, because I knew this wasn't a victory. It was only a delay. The investigation would go forward. Interpol would begin interviewing every gallery, every museum, every person listed in those ledgers. And me? I would have to testify again. This time, not as the accused, but as a key witness in one of the largest cultural fraud cases in modern European history. Outside, the reporters swarmed. Flashes, questions, microphones shoved into my face. "Clara, are you afraid of retaliation? What would your mother say if she were alive?" Are you going to sue the Devereaux estate in return? I said only one thing. What they did was calculated. What I did was necessary. Then I walked into the waiting car and disappeared into the back seat. Eliska was there. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a passport, new identity, emergency funds. Disappear, she said softly. For a while, until the storm passes. I looked out the window as the city blurred by. The storm wasn't passing. It was just beginning. For the first time in months, I disappeared. No press, no statements, no trace. They flew me to a quiet village in northern Portugal, where the ocean was loud and the wind louder. No security cameras, no neighbors for miles, just a stone house perched on a cliff, guarded by Interpol agents disguised as fishermen. Eliska came once, in the first week. She didn't stay long. They're still digging, she said. Not just into the Devereaux fortune, into your archives too. I looked at her. You mean my family? She hesitated. Yes, I nodded. I'd expected it. There was no version of this story where the Vandermeer name came out untouched. We were both complicit, just on different sides of the mirror. 2 weeks passed. Then, one morning, I received a package with no return address. Inside, a USB drive and a handwritten note. You destroyed our name, so here's yours. I plugged it into the secure laptop. Hundreds of files loaded. Old documents, travel records, conversations, photos of me and my mother from years ago. But then, something I didn't expect. A series of emails between my mother and Henri Devereaux. Some warm, others cold, but one stood out. Subject, Rotterdam. From Elizabeth Vandermeer to Henri Devereaux. Date, 3rd of September, 1995. If anything happens to me, you'll protect her. That was the deal. If I disappear, she gets everything, but not the guilt. She deserves a clean start, Henry. Give her that, at least. Promise me. I read it twice, 3 times. My mother hadn't betrayed me. She had shielded me. Every piece of the legacy she hid from me was so I wouldn't grow up like them. Cold, calculated, bound to secrets like shackles. And Henri? He had protected me. Even as he built an empire of silence, he had carved out a sliver of light, just for me. I leaned back, eyes burning. It changed everything. Not the facts, but the story I had told myself. That I was alone, that I had no one. Now I understood. My mother had fought in silence so I could speak in fire, but it also meant something else. The Devereaux didn't just want revenge, they wanted to rewrite the ending. And that meant they were close, too close. I packed a single bag, left a message for Eliska. I'm done hiding. Then I booked a flight to Paris, under my real name, because if this was the final chapter, I wanted it to be mine. I landed in Paris under gray skies and a name that no longer meant safety. Clara Vandermeer. Every step through Charles de Gaulle felt like a challenge, every glance a threat. But I didn't care. The moment I left the airport, I wasn't running anymore. I was hunting. I took a cab straight to the Musée Bélanger, one of the last major galleries still tied to the Devereaux name. Rumor was they were preparing to return several loaned pieces, quietly, discreetly, trying to cleanse their hands before the public noticed the blood. But I didn't come for the paintings. I came for the curator, Sébastien Faure, a man who had spent 20 years protecting Laurent's interests under the mask of cultural preservation. He didn't expect to see me. He froze the second I walked into his private office, where walls were lined with frames that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Clara, he said, standing, you shouldn't be here. I closed the door behind me. I have questions. I'm not answering any. You will, I cut in, because I'm the only one who knows what Henri promised my mother. His eyes flickered. He knew. I tossed a flash drive onto his desk. The full correspondence, between Elizabeth and Henri, including the letter where she offered to trade silence for protection, for me. He didn't touch it, just said, if this gets out, every institution tied to the Devereaux name will collapse. Then let it collapse. Sebastian exhaled slowly, then, reluctantly, he opened a drawer, took out a sealed envelope. Old, yellowed, with my mother's initials on the back. She gave me this before she died, he said, told me to hand it to you if the world ever turned upside down. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside, a letter. 1 page. Clara, if you're reading this, it means I failed to keep you away from the fire. I'm sorry. I should have told you everything, but I wanted you to be free, and truth doesn't free us. It binds us. Whatever you choose now, make it yours. Not mine, not theirs. Yours, I folded the letter slowly. It didn't give me answers. It gave me permission. Sebastian looked at me. What are you going to do? I stood. The only thing I haven't done yet. That evening, I walked into France 5 headquarters, one of the most respected public broadcast stations in Europe. I asked for a live interview. No script, no conditions. They hesitated, until I showed them what was on that flash drive. Then they cleared the schedule. At 20:00 sharp, I sat in front of a camera. No makeup, no stylist. Just the letter in my pocket, and every truth I had left in my voice. And for the first time, I said it plainly. The Devereaux family was not a dynasty. It was a machine, one built on theft, war, and silence. But they didn't act alone. They were helped, protected, praised, and I know because my family helped them too. But we can end it now. Not by destroying the art, but by reclaiming the truth behind it. The broadcast lasted 17 minutes. It was enough, because within the hour, my name was on every screen in Europe, again. But this time, not as a gold digger, not as a traitor. As the woman who ended the most powerful cultural lie of the century. The world didn't end after the broadcast, but something did. Within 48 hours, 2 Devereaux foundations folded. Julien Marceau resigned from 4 museum boards. Interpol announced the largest formal investigation into cultural laundering since 1945. And Laurent? He vanished. No arrests, no public statements, just disappeared. Adrian and Clara, the children, re-emerged briefly to release a carefully worded press release that said, "We denounce any illegal acts committed without our knowledge and will cooperate fully." No one believed it. I watched it from a cafe in Lisbon, where I had relocated temporarily. Camille called every day. She said my testimony was being used in 10 separate cases across 6 countries. Aliska checked in once, just to tell me that I'd be receiving formal protection under international whistleblower laws. And Sebastian? He mailed me the letter, the original, along with something else. A photo, black and white, faded with time. It showed my mother and grandmother standing outside the Rotterdam vault, arms around each other, holding something wrapped in canvas. On the back, a note. We thought we were preserving beauty. We were only hiding shame. I stared at it for a long time, because that was the truth. This wasn't a story of good versus evil. It was a story of legacy, of women who tried to protect something broken, of men who weaponized history, and of one person, me, who decided to stop running. I didn't become a hero. Heroes are pure. I'm not. But I became something else, visible, unignorable, a living reminder that silence protects no one forever. Sometimes the only way to honor the past is to tear down everything it built.